Do you always get along with your family? I know that I don't. There's many things that my sisters and I disagree on. But there's several ways that we can handle that. We can either just let those disagreements fester, or we can find ways to resolve differences. Today we're going to be looking at how Abram and his nephew Lot agreed to resolve their differences on this week's lesson. Hello, welcome to this week's lesson. I'm Vermeer. Today we're going to be looking at Abram, or as many of you pronounce it, Abram. Abram is actually the more correct Hebrew pronunciation of his name. And how he resolved differences that he had with his nephew Lot. Before we begin though, I'd like to remind you, please like, subscribe to the Mr. Vermeer's Class YouTube page. Please follow the Mr. Vermeer's Class Facebook page. And if you can, join me on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you get exclusive content. My new video on the life and legends of Cain is going to be up on there this week, exclusively on Patreon. So, let's talk about this. Abram and Lot. Abram was born in Ur of the Chaldees, down near the Persian Gulf, but he was told by God to take his family and move to a new land, a land that God said he would show him. So he and all of his family, including his father, started traveling north until they came to the land of Haran. Now, Haran was also the name of one of Abram's brothers. And when they got to that land, Abram's father, Terah, decided just to stay there. But God told Abram he needed to go on. He needed to go further. He said, just, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. We talked about this several weeks ago, about the faith that he had, just starting off and, saying, I'm going to just keep going until God tells me to stop here. And he did. But he took his nephew Lot with him. Now, Abram did not have any children of his own. Lot was the son of his deceased brother Haran. So he took Lot with him, possibly as his own son. That is, to raise as his own son. Since he did not have any children of his own yet, even though he was beginning to get old. And the Bible talks a lot about him getting old and not having children and how God answered that prayer. So that may be one reason why he felt responsibility towards Lot and why he decided to take Lot with him. So they travel until they get to the land of Canaan. And we're going to talk about this in Genesis chapter 13. They arrive in this land. God tells them, this is where you're going to set up. And God blesses them richly. Abram becomes very rich, a very successful rancher. He has a lot of herds of cattle and sheep. But God also blesses Lot. And Lot also becomes a very successful rancher. He's got his own cattle and sheep. And we're going to see how this leads to a disagreement here. Let's look at verses 5 through 8 of Genesis 13. It says, Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land was unable to support them as long as they stayed together, for they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land. So Abram said to Lot, Please, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives. So we see that they were traveling together, they were living together, so they had their herds very close to each other. Their flocks and herds possibly were even intermingling. But it got to a point where, the land can only hold so much. The land can only feed so much livestock. So Lot's shepherds and cowboys, if you want to call them that, were having problems with Abram's shepherds and cowboys. because the land could only support so much. They both wanted the best feeding grounds. They both wanted the best pastures to raise these, flocks and herds on. So this began to get into major quarrels, possibly even violent fights between the two groups. So what are they going to do about it? Abram says to Lot, he says, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives. What he's saying is, there's a responsibility between the two of us. Since we are related, we don't need to be fighting with each other. Because, the people living around us, it says the Canaanites and the Perizzites live in this land. The Canaanites were the descendants of Noah's grandson Canaan, the son of his Noah's son Ham. And they were still living in this land. And some say, that the Canaanites were actually cursed because instead of moving to Africa like the rest of Ham's descendants, they stayed up here in the land that is now Israel. And they say that's why God, chose to eliminate, those people. Don't know about that. That's just, one of the many legends about them. And then the Perizzites, we don't really know who they are. They are spoken of several times in the Bible, but we don't know where they came from, who they're descended from. But we do know they also were hostile toward Abram and his family and his descendants. But they were already living there, and Abram is saying, look, they're seeing us, and if they're seeing us not getting along, then that's going to make them think, we're going to be easier to conquer, we're going to be easier to take over, they can control us easier. So we need to be at peace with each other. We need to find a way to resolve this issue. And also, just because we're related, we love each other. If I have a disagreement with you, I could let that disagreement go so far that it turns into dislike. And instead of me not liking your position or not liking your belief or your argument or your lifestyle or whatever it is, it could quickly develop into me not liking you. And we should never get that way with our own families. We shouldn't get to the point where we let a disagreement become personal. I can disagree with, members of my family in regards to their beliefs, their politics, even their spirituality, their lifestyle, the things that they do, the way that they live. We can disagree. I'm sure they disagree with a lot of the things that I do and the way I live and the way I raise my family. We don't have to agree with everything that our family members do. I've raised my daughter. She's now off in college, and I've been trying to tell her now, look, you need to be making your own decisions now. Remember what I have taught you, but, now it's time for her to start deciding things for herself and, and living her life the way she thinks she should live it. And so far, I think she's, doing okay. She hasn't done anything to disappoint me yet, but she's going to grow up and she's going to have her own life. And there's going to be times when I'm going to disagree with the things that she does, with some of the choices that she makes. And she's going to disagree with, some of the things, maybe some of the things that I've already taught her. Maybe she's going to think, that's not right. That's not, for me. But we don't need to let that turn into a dislike for the person. Don't let the disagreement of beliefs become a personal thing. And Abram is trying to avoid that. He doesn't want to get to the point where he just gets to where he can't stand the sight of Lot himself because of these disagreements. So he says, let's find a way to settle this. Let's, not just agree to disagree, but let's find a way to resolve the situation. Since this is an actual physical situation, my herdsmen are actually fighting with your herdsmen. We need to find a way to avoid that. So let's continue on now, verses 9 to 11, to see what they decide to do. Abram continues saying, "Isn't the whole land before you? Separate from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." Lot looked out and saw that the entire plain of the Jordan, as far as Zoar, was well watered everywhere, like the Lord's garden and the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose the entire plain of the Jordan for himself. Then Lot journeyed eastward, and they separated from each other. So Abram tells Lot, he says, look, God gave us all of this land. God has says this whole countryside belongs to us. He's going to give it all to us. So we can settle wherever we want to. We're not hurting for space. So he says, let's move away from each other. But notice how he does this. He says, you make the choice. You decide where you want to live. And if you go that way, then I'm going to go this way. If you go this way, I'm going to go that way. So you decide what part of the land you want to live in, and then I will move my people and my herds away from you. Now, Abram was the patriarch. He was the leader of the family. Lot was still subservient to him since he was Abram's nephew. Abram could have said, this is where I'm going to live, you've got to get out. But instead, he gives Lot the choice. Sometimes the easiest way to settle a dispute is simply to let the other person have the choice. I used to work in a fast food restaurant, and a couple of pieces of advice that I was taught when I was doing my training for working there. The first thing they said was, if anyone has a disagreement, if anyone's complaining about their food, that it wasn't made right or that something's just wrong with it, offer them a free drink. Because drinks are the highest profit margin item you have. A little secret here, a 32-ounce soft drink at a restaurant probably costs the restaurant only a nickel. So everything they're making on that is profit. So you can easily give those away and not lose a lot of money. But they said offer them a free drink, and oftentimes that'll settle them down because they're getting something free. They're going to think, okay, I've won this argument, so I'm because I'm getting something free for it. But the best piece of advice, and I found this good in other aspects of life as well, is they told me, when someone comes up and starts complaining to you, about their food or about it, and I found this works for almost anything, just ask them, what can I do to make it right? Now, don't say it with the attitude, what do you want me to do about it? But ask them with the attitude, what can I do to make it right? In other words, you come up with the solution to the problem. And if it's agreeable to me, then that's what we'll do. You tell me what it is you want me to do to solve this problem. And they said oftentimes when you throw that back on them, that makes the person stop and realize that either it's not as big a problem as they thought it was, or oftentimes they realize that there's not really anything that they want you to do about it, or they realize there's not anything you really can do about it. They're just up there arguing because they're mad. So when disagreements come up, that's often a good way to try to resolve the differences. What can I do to make it right? Ask the other person that. And see if they have a solution. What is it that they're really angry about? Do they have, a way that they think it should be done? Or are they just angry and want to vent their anger? Because oftentimes, that's what a lot of disagreements simply are. Abram tells Lot, look, here's what we're going to do to make it right. You decide where you want to go, or, you decide which way you want me to go. And that's the way I'll go. He puts the decision onto Lot. And lets Lot make the decision. Now, Lot is going to have to live with the consequences of his decision, which we find out in later chapters is not very pleasant. It says, Lot looked out and saw the entire plain of the Jordan, as far as Zoar, that is the city of Zoar, was well watered everywhere. And it says, it was so well watered, it was like the Lord's garden, that is the Garden of Eden, or like the land of Egypt, where along the Nile River, where it's, very, green and everything grows very well. But it also has a little footnote here, probably written in by Moses when he was, compiling all these accounts. Moses puts in this, footnote. He says, this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Because after God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, that land is now completely desolate. This is the land close to what is now the Dead Sea. And it's possible that before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, that the area around the Dead Sea was thriving with plant life and thriving with grass and trees and, plants. But then after God rained down all that fire and brimstone, that may be what, made the Dead Sea, unsuitable for life now. And that's what turned all of that area into, the great desert that it is now. So at one time, that was a very beautiful, very healthy land. And that's where Lot chose to live because, look, there's plenty of grassland there. There's lots of room for my flocks and herds. And Lot goes, it says, Lot journeyed eastward and they separated from each other. And it says, Lot went and he pitched his tent toward Sodom. That is, he set up his tent close to the city of Sodom. And we find out later, of course, Lot eventually moves into the city of Sodom himself, which is a very bad decision because that was a very evil city. So, what about Abram? What does God think of Abram's decision? Well, let's skip ahead a few verses here to verse 14 through verse 18. It says, after Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, look from the place where you are. Look north and south, east and west. For I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Get up and walk around the land through its length and width, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. So after Lot separates, after Lot takes all of his livestock, all of his workers, his family, his wife, his children, and they move off toward the city of Sodom, and Abram probably moves a little bit in the other direction, God tells Abram, you've done the right thing. He blesses Abram. And he lets him know, look, I'm still with you. And he says, look where you are. And look that way, and that way, and that way, and that way. And as far as you can see, all the land that you can see, I'm going to give it to you and to your descendants. Now, this one verse has caused many a war. Because who are Abram's descendants? He, of course, becomes the father of the Israelites through his grandson Jacob, who later is renamed Israel. So all of the Israelites have claimed that land, and that's where the nation of Israel is today. But Israel had a brother, Esau, who became the father of a people called the Edomites. And you read about them later on in the Bible. And God eventually tells the Israelites to completely destroy the Edomites because they turn against God. They become wicked. They don't follow God. But because of a decision that Abram makes himself, because of a wrong decision that he makes, in trying to get a son for himself, he takes his wife's handmaid and sleeps with her, and she has a child. And this child becomes named Ishmael. And Ishmael is the father of all of the Arab nations today. So, all of the trouble that we have today between the Jews, who are the descendants of Israel, and the Palestinians, who are descendants of Ishmael, can be traced back to this single verse, Genesis 13:15. I will give you and your offspring all the land that you see. Both groups claim that land because they say God gave that land to our father Abraham. And the Palestinians say we're descended from Ishmael. Ishmael was his firstborn, therefore the land belongs to us. The Jews say we're descended from Isaac. Isaac is the son that God blessed. He sent Ishmael away and told him to go somewhere else, so the land belongs to us. And we lived here for so long until we were driven out by the Romans in AD 70. And the Palestinians say, yeah, you left and we came in and we took the land, therefore it belongs to us. And the Israelites say, well, yes, we left, but we were driven out, so the land still, by right is ours. And that's what's caused all this problem in the Middle East for the last 5,000 years. And people say, why can't we have peace in the Middle East? They've been arguing with each other now for 5,000 years, and it's not going to end anytime soon. And this is why. Because of poor decisions made by Abram. If he had just followed God's will, then there would not be a problem there today. But God did fulfill his prophecy. He says, I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth. Abram has had millions of descendants. When you count the Israelites, the Edomites, all the Arabs, all the other people, the descendants of all of Esau's sons, and so on. And Abram even had more sons. It says, after Sarah died, he took another wife, Keturah, and he had children with her. And then he said, he gave them all gifts and sent them away. So there's other peoples who are descended from Abraham who live in other parts of the world. So God keeps his promise. Even though we don't always follow God's will, God always keeps his promise. And even Lot became the father of a couple of nations. We find out later through a couple of nights of drinking and incest, Lot becomes the father of two other nations that we read about in the Bible, the Moabites and the Ammonites, who also become enemies of Israel later on. They are descended from Lot. So he also becomes the father of a couple of nations that don't exist anymore. But the point we have here in today's lesson is this. Abram could easily have just told Lot, look, get out. You're causing problems. Your herdsmen are causing problems with mine, so go away. But that would have caused bad feelings between the two and could have easily turned their disagreement into a personal dislike. And that's what we need to avoid. So instead, he resolved the situation by giving Lot the choice. Sometimes we need to just give in. We need to concede. We need to let the other person have his way for the sake of peace. as long as it does not cause us to compromise our beliefs in God and what we know is, God's will and what we know is right and wrong, sometimes it's best just to concede. And if it's not a moral issue, if it's not an issue of, right and wrong as far as God is concerned, then we need to sometimes just do what we can to keep the peace. Even if it means giving up what we think is right for us, giving up what we think is deservedly ours. God wants us to be at peace with our families. God wants us to get along with our families. We have a responsibility to be friendly with our family members. We should love our families. We should love our relatives. And we should do what we can to keep peace within our family. Not just our personal family, but also our Christian family. We are all children of God. If you're a Christian, then you are my brother or my sister, as we are all adopted children of God. So we need to all be friendly with each other as well. Hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you again next week.